"Get your hands off me, you stupid black girl." Adrian Klein's voice hissed, loud enough for his lapel mic to catch it and broadcast the sound throughout the entire auditorium. A dead silence suddenly fell over the room. Zuri's hand froze on the microphone cable. A moment before, the sound from Adrian's mic had been crackling. She was simply doing her job, checking the connection to ensure everything was perfect for the conference's most important speech. But an accidental stumble had caused her to brush against the toe of his shoe. Adrian leaned down, his face flushed red with anger and indignation. He snarled, his voice even crueler this time, right in her face. Adrian's venomous snarl echoed in the absolute silence, a single sentence that could destroy a person. But the trigger for this cruel moment wasn't anything significant. It had started just a few minutes earlier. It started with a faint crackle from a speaker. It started with the dedication of a young woman who simply wanted to do her job well. The air at the Dubai Global Tech Conference was thick with the smell of money and ambition. Spotlights swept across the top minds of the tech world, while numbers and charts danced on giant screens, promising a future shaped by algorithms. Backstage, Zuri Bennett was checking the soundboard. She wore the simple uniform of the event staff, her hair in neat braids. "His Highness Adrian Klein's system is acting up again," a colleague named Leo sighed. "It always has issues." "I'll take a look," Zuri replied concisely, her voice calm. "It's probably just a loose jack." She put on her headset and moved swiftly toward the stage, where Adrian Klein, CEO of Apex Corporation, stood like a king. He glanced at the Patek Philippe on his wrist, his impatience obvious. 5 minutes. "I don't have all day," he snapped at an assistant. For a moment, Zuri's gaze drifted to a nearby hallway. Her mother, Maria, was quietly wiping up a freshly spilled coffee stain. She saw her daughter, and a silent flicker of pride lit up her tired eyes before she quickly returned to her work. A discreet nod passed between them. It was their own world, existing in parallel to all this glamour. Zuri stepped onto the stage, kneeling near the podium. Adrian recoiled slightly, as if her very presence might soil him. "Get on with it," he clipped. Zuri didn't respond. Her fingers moved quickly over the connectors. She found the loose jack instantly and secured it. As she stood up, she momentarily lost her balance, and her knee brushed against the toe of Adrian's polished leather shoe. A dead silence fell over the room. Adrian's voice hissed, cold and cruel, captured by the microphone and amplified throughout the auditorium. "Get your hands off me, you stupid black girl." Everything seemed to stop. 1,000 pairs of eyes were fixed on the stage. Zuri stood frozen, her chest tight. Adrian wasn't finished. He leaned down, looking her straight in the eye, his voice dripping with contempt for everyone to hear. "What could you possibly know about technology? Your kind belongs on the floor, scrubbing it." He finished with a smirk, satisfied that he had put a lesser in her place. Zuri took a deep breath. She didn't cry, she didn't tremble. She simply lifted her head and looked directly into Adrian's eyes. There was no fear in her gaze, only an unnerving calm. She turned and walked off the stage with quiet composure, leaving Adrian and his arrogance alone in the blinding spotlight. In the front row, the legendary investor Victor Beaumont narrowed his eyes. He had seen the entire exchange. He said nothing, simply watching the young woman depart, an almost imperceptible nod on his face. Seeing Zuri walk away in silence, Adrian felt his authority challenged. He couldn't stand that his prey refused to act scared. He raised a hand, his tone shifting from anger to a condescending air, as if he were bestowing some great lesson. "Do you see, ladies and gentlemen?" Adrian said into the microphone, his voice echoing through the hall. "This is the problem. We give opportunities to those who don't deserve them, and this is what we get in return. Carelessness, ignorant silence when questioned." He let out a dry, humorless laugh, watching Zuri's retreating back. I'd bet her highest qualification is a certificate for completing a janitorial course. Perhaps we should be grateful she didn't spill soap water all over the server racks. A few scattered, uncomfortable chuckles came from the audience. Most people were visibly uneasy. The atmosphere grew heavy. Adrian glanced at a few other CEOs in the front row, as if searching for approval for his venomous joke. He continued, his voice laced with sarcasm, deliberately speaking loud enough for Zuri to hear. Perhaps I should send a complaint to her mother. I'm sure she's working somewhere around here, isn't she? Teach her daughter how to hold a mop properly, instead of letting her touch multi-million-dollar equipment. That last comment crossed a line. It wasn't just about insulting Zuri. He had dragged her mother into it. Zuri stopped dead in her tracks, her hands clenched into tight fists. She could endure the slurs aimed at herself, but the blatant disrespect toward her mother was a red line. Her entire body tensed with a cold, sharp rage. Victor Beaumont noticed. He saw the subtle tremor in the young woman's shoulders. He saw the clenched fists. He had seen enough. Adrian's cruelty was no longer just arrogance. It had become a sickness. And it was a sickness that required a potent cure. The insult to his mother was the final straw. Zuri stopped. Anger and pain surged through her, but instead of tears, a cold calm washed over her. She refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. She turned on her heel and walked with purpose toward the tech station at the back of the auditorium, ignoring the whispers behind her. Her colleague, Leo, rushed over. "Zuri, are you okay? That bastard." "I'm fine," Zuri cut him off, her voice even but laced with determination. "But the sound isn't." She sat down at the control board and put on her headset. Adrian Klein had already started his speech. Through the headphones, his voice was harsh and grating. Zuri stared at the monitors, her anger now channeled into laser focus. Her fingers flew across the buttons and sliders. She filtered out the harsh frequencies in his voice. She added a touch of warmth, giving it more authority. She recalibrated the speakers, ensuring the sound spread evenly throughout the hall without a single echo. Next, she moved to the lighting console. The direct spotlight on Adrian was too bright, too harsh. Zuri gently adjusted it. She dimmed the main light, adding a subtle fill light from the sides to create a more dynamic look. The entire process took less than a minute. The result was astonishing. Adrian's voice suddenly sounded richer, more powerful. Under the refined lighting, he looked more professional, more impressive. His presentation continued flawlessly. The man on stage had no idea that he was being made brilliant by the very person he had just crushed. The other technicians behind her stared, their jaws hanging open. They looked at each other, then at Zuri with a mixture of awe and fear. They had just witnessed incredible talent, but no one dared to offer a word of praise. They all went back to work in silence, terrified of the man on stage. Adrian Klein was at the peak of his smugness. His voice boomed powerfully. The lighting sculpted him perfectly. He was pontificating about the apex standard, a philosophy of flawless perfection in every product. He raised the remote to click to his most important slide, the one showcasing the $3.5 billion deal he was about to close. He pressed the button. Nothing happened. He pressed it again, harder. The screen remained frozen. An awkward silence began to creep into the auditorium. A crack had just appeared in Adrian's perfect facade. His face clouded over. Anger and humiliation flared. In his mind, there was only one person to blame. He slammed the remote down on the podium and grabbed the microphone. "It seems we're having another technical issue," he said, his voice ice cold. He didn't look toward the tech station, where the technicians were scrambling. Instead, he looked directly at the crowd, as if sharing a collective frustration. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is precisely what I'm talking about. Perfection demands focus at every level. When one link is weak, the entire system is compromised." He paused, then spoke slowly, deliberately. "I need the tech assistant from before to return to the stage. Right now." His command rang out across the auditorium. This time, it wasn't a baseless personal insult. It was cloaked in the guise of professional problem-solving. He was turning the mishap into an opportunity to demonstrate his power. Zuri, who had just sat down, knew the remote's dead battery was a minor issue that could be handled discreetly, but she knew that's not what he wanted. She stood up, ignoring the worried looks from her colleagues, and walked toward the stage. She stepped up, pulling a backup remote from her pocket, and walked calmly toward Adrian. He didn't take it. Instead, he took a step back, crossed his arms, and sized her up with a look of utter contempt. As Zuri was about to hand him the new remote, Adrian turned to the audience. He smirked, a malicious grin spreading across his face. "Behold," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "so everyone can see what a foolish mistake from the lower ranks looks like. Can't even manage to check the battery in a remote." He had the excuse he needed. Now, his public shaming looked like a lesson in professional negligence, and Zuri was the perfect scapegoat. On stage, Adrian crossed his arms, savoring the feeling of power as he watched Zuri stand there, isolated and exposed. He believed he had won completely. "Now then," he said, in a tone of mock generosity, "let's get this over with." He turned to the front row, seeking an approving nod from Victor Beaumont. Even Mr. Victor Beaumont here would agree that there's no room for incompetence in our world, wouldn't you, sir? It was a fatal mistake. Instead of nodding, Victor Beaumont slowly got to his feet. He didn't rush, but his movement caused the entire auditorium to hold its collective breath. Every eye, including Adrian's, was fixed on the most powerful man in the room. A security guard quickly handed him a microphone. "You're right, Adrian," Victor began, his voice deep and clear, resonating through the space. "There is absolutely no room for incompetence." Adrian smiled, thinking he had been validated. "That's why," Victor continued, "I find it odd that the most competent person in this auditorium is currently being humiliated on stage." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Adrian's brow furrowed, confused. Victor took a few steps toward the stage, aiming the microphone at the audience, but his gaze was locked on Adrian. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "many of you have heard about a young, groundbreaking AI research team that my fund has been investing in, a team we've all been eager to partner with." The room was silent. Everyone knew of that mysterious research group. Victor gestured toward the young woman standing silently in her event staff uniform. "Allow me to introduce you to Zuri Bennett." He paused for a second, letting the name hang in the air. "The head of the young AI research team my fund has been quietly sponsoring for the past 3 years." A collective gasp swept through the thousands of people in the audience. Adrian froze. The color drained from his face, leaving it as white as a sheet. He stammered, "What? You're joking, Victor. This girl, she's an assistant." "I am not joking, Adrian," Victor replied, his voice like steel. "I never joke about true talent." Zuri lifted her head, just as shocked as Adrian. She knew Victor was her patron, but she never imagined he would reveal it like this. Her eyes met Victor's, and in them she saw absolute trust. She straightened her back, no longer a humiliated assistant, but a leader standing right where she belonged. Victor looked directly at Adrian's ashen face. Any hint of pity was gone, replaced by cold disappointment. "Adrian," Victor said, his voice steady, but each word landed like a hammer blow. "You thought she was just an assistant, but many CEOs in this room, perhaps even you, have spent the last 6 months trying to get a meeting with her team." He turned to the other investors in the front row, whose eyes were glued to the stage. "They did so," Victor continued, "because they want to acquire the patent for a game-changing AI algorithm. A patent for which Zuri Bennett, the young woman standing right here, is the lead co-author. If the first announcement was a shock, this one was a bombshell." The investors were completely silent. Many of them knew exactly which patent he was talking about. It was worth billions. Adrian's face was no longer white. It was a sickly grey. He realized his mistake wasn't just a moral failing, it was a financial catastrophe. He had just humiliated the person holding the keys to the future of his industry. But Victor wasn't finished. He needed to answer the question on everyone's mind. Why? Perhaps you're wondering why such a talent would be wearing this uniform, fixing a crackling microphone. He looked back at Zuri, his eyes now filled with pride. Because Zuri and I wanted an answer. We wanted to know if, in this tech world that supposedly values talent above all else, a top executive could see past a person's skin color and their uniform. Victor stepped closer to Adrian, who stood frozen in place. She was here to test how senior leadership recognizes talent, regardless of background. And today, Adrian, you've given us a crystal clear answer. Every word from Victor was like a public verdict. He hadn't just insulted an employee. He had failed the most important test of all, in front of the entire investment world. After Victor's final declaration, a heavy silence descended on the auditorium. It was no longer the silence of shock, but the silence of judgment. Thousands of people, hundreds of investors, all looking at Adrian Klein as the most naked fool in the world. Adrian stood there, motionless. He could feel everything crumbling around him. He wanted to say something, to object, to make an excuse, but his throat was dry. Any words he could offer were now meaningless. The silence was broken by the sound of a chair snapping back. In the second row, Mr. Chen, the head of a major Shanghai investment firm and the lead partner in the $3.5 billion deal, slowly rose to his feet. He didn't look at Adrian. He looked directly at Victor Beaumont. "Mr. Beaumont," Mr. Chen said, his voice clear in the silence. "Thank you for the clarification." Then, he turned to his aide and said in an icy tone, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Notify the legal team. The deal with Apex is terminated. Immediately. We do not invest in a company whose leadership can't tell the difference between an asset and trash." A horrified gasp rippled through the auditorium. The $3.5 billion deal, the entire foundation of Apex's future, the reason for this speech, had vanished into thin air with a single sentence. Immediately after, another woman stood up. She was Katrina Schmidt, representing a major German tech fund. "Our fund as well," she announced. "We are retracting our partnership offer in its entirety. Furthermore, we would like to formally express our interest in partnering directly with Miss Zuri Bennett's research team." It was the killing blow. Not only were they cancelling the deal, but they were publicly declaring their intent to side with the very person Adrian had just trampled. A silent tidal wave began. Across the room, people pulled out their phones. The sound of tapping keyboards filled the air. They weren't listening to Adrian anymore. They were selling. On tablets and screens, the chart for Apex's stock, APX, began a historic nosedive, a straight red line plunging into oblivion. Within minutes, hundreds of millions of dollars of Adrian's company value evaporated. An entire empire built on arrogance was collapsing in real time. Adrian staggered back a step, his face completely drained of blood. He could feel his phone vibrating incessantly in his pocket, undoubtedly his board of directors, but he didn't dare answer. He knew it was all over. His empire had turned to ash, right on the stage of his greatest triumph. Adrian wasn't dragged off the stage. He walked off on his own, but they were the heaviest steps of his life. No one made eye contact. Thousands of people were there, yet he was utterly alone. He was like a ghost passing through a crowd that had already turned its back on him. Before he even made it back to his hotel, the video of the public shaming had gone viral. It wasn't just news. It became a symbol of toxic arrogance in the tech industry. An emergency board meeting for Apex was convened via video call that very night. The decision took only a few minutes. Adrian Klein was fired. The reason wasn't just for his shameful behavior, but for his unforgivable stupidity. He had publicly humiliated a billion-dollar asset. His arrogance had become the sharpest knife which he had used to gut his own career. The stage he had used to assert his dominance had become the guillotine for his reputation. A few days later, at a press conference watched by the world, Zuri Bennett stood on a different stage. This time, she wasn't wearing a technician's uniform. She wore an elegant pantsuit, and standing beside her was Victor Beaumont. "Today," Victor announced, "we are not just investing in technology, we are investing in people." He turned to Zuri with a proud smile. "I'd like to introduce the new director of the Global Talent Development Program for the Beaumont Fund, Miss Zuri Bennett." As Zuri stepped up to the podium, the room erupted in thunderous applause. She looked out at the crowd, her gaze calm and confident. "I have stood on both sides of a stage like this," she began. "I have been the invisible person, and I know there are countless other brilliant talents out there who are just as invisible. My mission is to ensure that we never overlook a single one of them again, just because they don't come from the right place or have the right look." Her mother, Maria, sat in the front row. She was no longer in a janitor's uniform, but in a graceful dress. Tears streamed down her face, but they were tears of boundless pride. The story of Adrian Klein quickly became a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms everywhere. It was proof that arrogance and contempt could destroy a career in a single moment. Conversely, the story of Zuri Bennett became an inspiration, a testament to the fact that true value lies in talent, character, and how we treat one another. Because in this connected world, a single word can lift someone up, or it can sink an entire empire.